we're going to be working on Psalm 22 this morning. And David goes through a lot of moods with these Psalms. This 22nd Psalm is nothing like the Psalm you're going to hear after that, the 23rd Psalm, which Stephen worked on a couple of weeks ago. They sound in every way different. And the beginning of this Psalm is tough. But David's been through a lot, like in his life. David's lost a marriage. He's lost a child. He's had a very destructive affair along the way. And I think he's like trying to remember, having probably not a great day. You can imagine that. And I think he's trying to remember how he's feeling this way, why he's feeling this way. And the best part about what's happening in this psalm is David loves God enough and trusts God enough to lay out his heart for him. Like he's not afraid of God. You're going to see here in a minute, he's disappointed with God, but he's not afraid of God. He's not afraid to tell God exactly the way he feels, that's for sure. And I mean, I think every bit of that is important in building intimacy and an intimate relationship with God. You got to be able to figure out a way, sooner or later, to tell God the truth about the way you feel, don't you? Like, if you're God, you're like, wouldn't you like to have if you're God, wouldn't you like to have some honest conversations that kind of go, could we stop all the nice stuff and just cut to the chase? Like, are you disappointed in me right now today? And if you're brave enough to go, yeah, I really am, God, that's where God would go, you know, he'd be like, this is good. Let's just start here. Let's start right here. Because God is not afraid of our feelings. He's not afraid of our disappointments. He's not afraid of our anger. He's not afraid of our bitterness. All that comes into stride for him. It just does. And I think that's an unbelievable opportunity for us to understand how much God loves us and how much he wants us to know that he gets us. I mean, that's the way it is. Let's start with this psalm. So here we go. It isn't pretty, got to tell you. God, my God, why did you dump me miles from nowhere? Doubled up with pain, I called to God all the day long. No answer. Nothing. I keep at it all night, tossing and turning. And you, God, are you indifferent? Are you above it all? Leaning back on the cushions of Israel's praise? We know that you were there for our parents. They cried for your help, and you gave it. They trusted, and you gave them a good life. But here I am, God. I'm nothing. I feel today, God, like I'm an earthworm. Something to step on, something to quash. Everyone pokes fun at me. They make faces at me. They shake their heads. Let's see how God handles this one. Since God likes him so much, let him help him. Where have you heard that before, by the way? You heard it on the cross. You heard it on the cross when Jesus was with some people that he was in the middle of dying on the cross. And that's the kind of jeering that he got from that. If you're so good, it was the one criminal, if you're so good, get off of that cross and save yourself. That's where you've heard that. So it goes on and it goes, and here I am a nothing, earthworm, something to step on, quash. When I left the womb, you cradled me. Since the moment of birth, you've been my God. Then you moved far away, and trouble moved in next door. Well, God, I need a neighbor. Now, packs of wild dogs are coming at me. Thugs gang up on me. They pin me down hand and foot and lock me in a cage. I feel like I'm a bag of bones, God. I feel like I'm nothing. They take my wallet, take the shirt off my back. They throw dice for my clothes. You also have heard that in the crucifixion story. Here's what it says in Matthew. After they had finished nailing to the cross and were waiting for him to die, they killed time by throwing dice for his clothes. Matthew 27. Here it is right here in this psalm. Psalm goes on. You, God, whatever you're going to do, don't put off my rescue. Hurry up and help me. Don't let them cut my throat. Don't let these mongrels devour me. If you don't show up soon, I'm done for. Gored by the bulls, meat for the lions. Psalm 21, verses 1 to 22, verses 1 to 21. So the thing is, David is lost, isn't he? Whatever has brought him to that place. And there are only a couple other times in the Psalms where you hear that level of despair coming from this guy who has always desperately loved God, who has always had this incredibly intimate relationship with God. A lot of people say that reading the Psalms, and he wrote a lot of them, almost all of them, they're like, those things are really hard to read because they're so intimate, they're so real, and David is so adept at expressing his heart. And right here, his heart is, he's angry, he feels defeated. What I think he principally feels, though, is alone. Can you imagine a time when you felt this alone with God? Can you imagine a time in your life when you were this angry with God? And I bet some of us could say, yeah, I really do remember being this angry at God, because it's just like us to kind of go, you know what? Despite circumstance A, B, C, or D, which I have built, which are the building blocks for the disaster that I'm in the middle of now, isn't it more convenient for me to say, you know what? All this is God's fault. Like, there's nothing about this that's my fault. I don't want to take responsibility for this. It's got to be God. Isn't that just how we would be in a lot of cases anyway? Can you imagine being in a place where you feel this stuck? Can you imagine being able to say to God, look, here's the thing. That's what David's saying is, God, here's what I want to know. I'm in such a bad place. I'm in such a tough spot. I feel so defeated. I mean, God, like, do you even care? Do you even care? Because at that point, his anger turns to what? Turns to hurt. Pretty common. If you're angry long enough, eventually, once the swelling kind of goes down, what are you left with? You're left with hurt. And if you live with hurt long enough, what do you think comes next? Well, if you live with hurt long enough, it takes you to that place of abandonment. And when you get to abandonment, if you live with abandonment long enough, it takes you to a place of despair. And see, like, when you get to despair, despair is exactly where the enemy in our lives does the very best work with us. Amen? Despair takes you to a place of asking, where is God? What is God doing? Why isn't God delivering what I need for him to deliver? And that's a tailor-made recipe for the enemy to step into your life and mine and go, yeah, I got to tell you, look at the facts. Look at the history. I mean, God, he's really, really let you down. Like, he's really blown it. This didn't happen. This didn't happen. This blew up. This happened over here. Your finances didn't do what they should have done. I mean, the thing is, Mark, God really isn't that reliable. He really isn't that reliable. And like, I know that's been to me. Like, when I'm the most vulnerable is when I feel like every bit of that disappointment coming my way. I don't have a way to explain that particular disappointment. I don't have a way to explain the kind of pain that I've been in. And so, like, the way it goes, the way it goes is, yeah, where am I going to try to put that unexplainable set of events or unexplainable set of emotions? It's probably going to go to God. Strangely enough, why is it true that we do it that way, or a lot of us? Why do we focus our attention on God when we probably left God out of the issue for a long time? Why is that? Well, because the truth, we trust God enough to be able to believe that somehow he may be able to speak to us. It's kind of like the goat. If you think about who your go-to is in your life, think of a person, not necessarily God, but think of a person. Like, is it true that the person that's your go-to, are they always gonna give you a soothing word? Probably not. Are they sometimes gonna disagree with you? Probably they are. Is it gonna be true that sometimes they're gonna tell you, man, do you kind of understand what has happened here to get you to this place? Are they gonna ask you those kind of questions? They probably are. But the one thing they're gonna do is, there will never be a time for you or for them when compassion is missing. There will never be a time with you or with them in that relationship where when you hear them telling you the truth, not only does it make sense, even if you don't want to believe it, but you also know that what it's backed up by is they're loving you to the very best of their ability. The reason the enemy has us when we get this far into our own pain and our own emotions, the reason he has us where he wants us is because he is now able to do some very important principal things. The first being, he's very good, very adept at separating us from God. And so the first thing the enemy is going to work on is, I got to figure out how to get, like I got David there. I got David right there. I got to figure out how to get you there. I got to figure out how to get all of you there. What is it going to take for me to get all of you to that place of aloneness, that place of being afraid, and that place of being on the run? What do I got to do? And there, honestly, when it comes to the enemy, there is nothing that is like beneath him, above him, or that he's not willing to do. We're doing a series on Thursday night, and it's based on a series that Passion City Church, Louis Giglio did. And the title of this series is, Don't Let the Enemy Have a Seat at Your Table. Sounds simple enough, but it's like, how hard is that to do when you turn around and you imagine yourself sitting at this table, and the whole time you're like looking at God, looking at God, looking at God, looking at God, and you turn around, you're having a particularly bad day, tough things are happening to you, and you like look again, and you have somehow unwittingly perhaps invited the enemy to sit right there, to start speaking into you, basically lying to you, because there's nothing the enemy is going to say to you that isn't a lie. That's the truth of that. Discouraging you, causing you disappointment, and doing a first-class job. When it happens to me, it's every time, doing a first-class job of basically saying, Mark, it's time for a gut check. Is God really been all that reliable for you? Has God really been on the lookout for you? Has God really handled this well for you? Forget about the fact that there's other circumstances that have caused me to get to that place. What his job is to find some way to keep God and I apart. Why? Because he knows that the minute God gets involved, he's defeated. If you want to find a way to get the enemy out of your seat that you're sitting beside, simply start talking to God. Simply start becoming honest with God. Simply start sharing with God anything and everything that is currently going on with you. And that's going to get the job done. It will. It sounds simple, but I mean, it's really just true. So we get to that place of being alone and afraid and on the run. That's called despair. Something important about despair is that despair is literally, and this isn't my definition, it's like an AA definition. Despair is what it means to get to the end of yourself, right? It's like I've tried to figure out this problem. And along the way, this problem became a bigger problem and a bigger problem and a bigger problem. It grew exponentially in a week. And I found out this and this and this. That made everything harder. And so getting to the end of myself is like the realization, which can really be tough, that, you know what? I mean, I can't fix this problem by myself. Like, I can't figure out what to do with this. I don't know how to get out of this. And that's where God starts to speak into us. And God starts right then saying, well, what do you think it would be like if I took a shot at this? And right then, you've probably had that kind of an emotion somewhere, or experience somewhere. Right then, that's really when God starts to do his very best work at our toughest places. Tell me that's not true. Like at our toughest places in life, that is where God actually starts to do his very best work. And why is that? That is because we become available. We stop trying to run because we've run ourselves, we feel like almost to death. That's where David is in this psalm. We stop trying to create solutions for ourselves, and we kind of get to a place of going, here's how bad it is. And that's David right here in this psalm. Only God can save me. So we get to that place, wherever it is and however it is, that's where God starts speaking his words of love. That's where God starts breathing for us. What you're going to hear from God is a fascinating little phrase. Can you imagine our boy David right here going on this unbelievable rant? And my emotions of reading it didn't even get close to telling the story, I'm sure. That heartfelt brokenness that David's feeling, can you imagine what it must have been like when David, all of a sudden, after getting all of that out, and it's kind of like my mom she'd be like, well, honey, tell me the story. And you would start telling her how bad this was and this was and this was. And she would go, her famous word was, is that it? And she would say, what else? Like, can you guys not imagine that that's exactly the way God is doing this with us? Like, he listens and he listens and he listens. And he looks at us and he goes, you know what? Is that it? Meaning like, I've got this. What else? I mean, I remember explaining to her, my mom one time, I'd come home and I was not the world's all-time best math student. That is like a kind of ridiculous understatement. I did fine with like geometry, did okay with algebra. I think I was lost in calculus class the entire year, and I never took it again. I'm pretty sure I picked a college where I could not have to take calculus. Like that thing, it's a killer. And I came home from this class, and so I think I got a 40 on this exam or midterm or whatever. I come home and I'm telling my mom this, and I'm like, the world's over. I'm not going to get into college ever. Nothing is going to ever happen to me. La-di-da-di-da. And she looks at me with her thing, and she's kind of like, yeah, is that it? Like, what else? You're like, what else? I'm like, David, man, the world's coming to a freaking end. What else? What are you doing? She's like, well, you're going to be able to figure it out. So then she starts talking to me and she goes, what do you think the first step ought to be? I'm like, Mom, I'm coming to you because I don't have any clue what the first step ought to be. That's why I'm here. She then says, good. Like you can imagine God doing that, right? This is good that we're right at this place. This is good that you don't know what to do next. Now do you think maybe you can take some direction? She goes, well, here's what you're going to do next. You're going to get your butt up. You're going to go back to school the next day. You're going to sit down with your math teacher, calculus teacher. You're going to go, I blew this test. I blew it because I really wasn't ready for it. I said, no, it's because she's a bad teacher. She goes, I was in high school, right? I go, no, Mom, she's a terrible teacher. My mom goes, look, whatever you do, don't say that. I'm like, Right. I'm like, it's true though. She goes, Mark, it doesn't matter if it's true. Some things that are best said don't need to be the truth. That's the way it is. She goes, this time don't say that. Go to her with your hat in your hand and go, I didn't handle this test well. What do I got to do to fix it? Which is exactly what I did. The thing about it was, she gave me hope by saying, this is not the end of the world. And God, in our worst places, at our worst times, this is God saying, look, man, I'm still here. And I'm here for you. I'm never going to quit on you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to say to you, this is the best I can ever get. I'm never going to say that. I'm never going to walk away from you. I'm never going to tell you that there's a problem that I'm not going to be able to help you with. I'm still here. I think the most powerful words I ever have heard from God in my entire life are, I'm still here. So David goes on. I think David, by the way, is having this massive confrontation with God. I think he's off on this thing. He's completely loaded up for bear. He's had all these emotions. He puts them all on the table. And I think somehow God shows up right in the middle of his biggest mess. And I think God sits down, and I think God takes a seat at his table across from David. I think God tells the enemy to leave right then. That's me. That's my vision, is I think God says, look, you got to go. You're not going to sit in my seat because I belong in that seat where you are right now, and you got to go. You got to know God's just that bold with the enemy. And so the thing changes then. You imagine like sitting down in that kind of experience. And so now David's seeing a whole different life and a whole different world. And it shows in the second half of this psalm. Here's what he says. Think how it goes all the way to the end of the most despairing thing possible. And now what you're going to hear is this. Here's the story I'm going to tell my friends when they come to worship. How far away do you think he was from worship all that time? And punctuated with hallelujahs. Shout hallelujah, you God worshipers. Give glory, you sons of Jacob. Adore him, you daughters of Israel. Here's the thing. This is the same David, by the way. God has never let you down. He has never looked the other way when you were being kicked around. He has never wandered off to do his own thing. He has been right there listening to you. That's happening today. Down and outers sit at God's table and eat their fill. Imagine a banquet that you'll be hearing about in the 23rd Psalm, one psalm later, which Stephen talked about. Everyone in the hunt for God is here, praising him. Live it up, God says, from head to toe, and don't ever quit. All the power mongers before him, what are they doing? Worshiping. All the poor and powerless too, what are they doing? Worshiping. Along with those who never got it together, what are they doing? Worshiping. Our children and their children will get in on this as the word is passed along from parent to child. That what? God will never quit on you. What else? I'm still here. Babies not yet conceived are going to hear that good news, that God does what he says. That's the end of that Psalm 22. So here's the thing. Redemption, that's what's going on in this psalm. Redemption takes many shapes and many forms, but it always shows up as demonstrated love. Not just love in theory, not just love, it is a good idea, but demonstrated love, the kind of demonstrated love that says, God loved the world so much that he offered up his only begotten son, Jesus, to die for us, that whoever accepts a relationship with Jesus, today, tomorrow, or any other day, you will have life forever. That's what it says. Demonstrated love. God always does what he says. What does he say? I'm never going to leave you. Never means never. I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. Never. That's Deuteronomy 31. Never means never. When you're having a terrible day, if you don't remember one other thing, you got to go, what do I know? I know that despite what I'm in the middle of here, despite how bad I feel, despite how messed up this relationship is, despite how out of it I feel about life in general, despite how despairing I feel, how disappointed I feel, how rejected I feel, how whatever I feel, one thing I know for sure, God will never leave me, ever. How about when I don't trust him? How about I don't really believe in God anymore? Never. How about when you don't believe that God is trustworthy? Nope, not then either. How about if you point blank walk away from God and spend several years 100 miles away from God and you basically all but abandon him? Nope, not then either. The thing is, never means never, ever. Jesus is here right now in this room. What do you think he's saying? Here's what I think he's saying. He never abandoned me. He raised me up, and he'll raise you up too. That's what I think Jesus is saying. See, like that's the beginning, and it's really the beginning of a very incredible story that shows itself in all of Scripture and shows itself in our lives, but it's also the very strong ending of an even better story. And the better story is, look at the peace, look at the confidence, and look at the hope, and just being able to walk away from this and going, I don't know what else I heard, but I did hear God's never going to quit on me. Not ever, never. In Jesus' sweet name, amen.